November 3, 1944. 11:47 p.m. somewhere in the Hurtgen Forest, Western Germany. The trees do not move here. That is the first thing a man notices when he is forced to live in the Hurtgen. The suffocating, absolute stillness of the ancient woods. No wind reaches the forest floor. The canopy above is too dense, too ancient, too completely indifferent to the mechanized slaughter bleeding out through its thick, twisted roots. Somewhere to the east, American artillery has been firing for 6 straight hours. It is a rhythmic, patient thunder. A rolling barrage that shakes the earth like a steady, mechanical heartbeat. But in this specific clearing, in this specific ravine, the only sound is the cracking of frozen mud beneath a German infantryman's boots. Private Jirian Voss is 22 years old. He does not look 22. His face carries the hollow, haunted gauntness of a man who has been cold for so long that physical warmth has become a purely theoretical concept. It is something he remembers faintly, and with deep suspicion. His uniform, once a proud, sharp field gray, is now the exact color of the forest itself. Brown, black, the gray-green of wet decay. His unit, a battered rifle company of the 275th Infantry Division, has been holding a stretch of this frozen timberline for 11 days. 11 days of relentless American shelling. 11 days of surviving on hard, black bread that requires conscious effort to chew, and ersatz coffee that tastes of roasted acorns and dirt. The German war machine is starving. Ammunition is counted by the individual bullet. Every artillery shell is precious. Every drop of fuel is rationed with bureaucratic fanaticism. They are an army cannibalizing itself just to survive one more night in the freezing mud. Voss is not supposed to be this far forward, but his patrol had pushed deeper than ordered into the ravine, drawn through the freezing fog by the faint, mechanical groan of a vehicle in distress. Then, the air changes. It happens in an instant. A scent cuts through the heavy, suffocating odors of wet pine resin, frozen mud, cordite, and unburied dead. It stops Jirian Voss dead in his tracks. His raw, blistered hands tighten reflexively around the freezing steel of his Mauser rifle. He inhales sharply. His brain cannot immediately process the sensory data. It is sweet. It is rich. It is earthy. It is a smell he has not encountered in over 3 years of grinding total warfare. Chocolate. Hershey's tropical bar, to be exact. The scent is practically a physical assault in this cathedral of mud and death. Voss pushes his way through a thicket of shattered pine branches. He steps to the edge of a steep drop-off and looks down. There it sits. A GMC CCKW 2.5-ton cargo truck. The legendary American Deuce and a Half. It has skidded off the logging trail and tipped violently onto its side in the ravine. One heavy rubber tire is still suspended in the air. The driver's cabin is dark and empty. The crew has fled, or they are dead in the brush. It does not matter to Voss. What matters is the cargo. The heavy canvas tarp covering the bed has torn open. Heavy wooden crates have spilled out, tumbling down the embankment and smashing into the frozen earth. Stenciled black English letters mark the pristine wood. A shadow detaches from the tree line behind Voss. Sergeant Fauco Brandt, 34 years old. Before the war, Brandt was a master mason and a logistics manager for heavy civilian construction projects in the Ruhr Valley. He is a man who understands how to move thousands of tons of material, how to feed shifts of labor, how to measure the brutal cost of industrial effort. Brandt looks down at the overturned truck. He looks at Voss. He gestures downward with a sharp, silent nod. They slide down the embankment into the ravine. They work in complete silence. It is the specific, hyper-focused silence of starving men who are terrified of what they might find, and terrified of what it means to want it so badly. They use their bayonets to pry the reinforced wooden lids. The iron nails scream as they pull free. The first lid pops off. They expect mortar shells. They expect desperately needed .30 caliber ammunition or anti-tank rockets. Instead, they find olive-drab cartons, wax-dipped boxes, cellophane. Voss reaches in. He pulls out a rectangular box. It is heavy, compact, deliberate. This is the American K-ration. specifically designed and engineered by the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps. It is a masterpiece of industrial survival. It weighs exactly 2.5 pounds. It is formulated to deliver exactly 2,830 calories with a perfect macronutrient distribution. It is built to withstand the most extreme environments on Earth, rigorously tested to remain completely edible from -20 degrees Fahrenheit to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The packaging itself is a marvel. Everything fits together with an architectural, uncompromising precision. It is wrapped in a sleeve of moisture-proof cellophane. Voss turns the package over in his numb, bleeding fingers. The cellophane is pristine. There is not a single crease or tear. This is not food cobbled together under the duress of wartime shortages. This is food designed, engineered, and assembled with the casual, terrifying confidence of a nation that has not once worried about running out of materials. Voss drops the ration box and moves frantically to the next splintered crate. He pries it open. Inside, stacked in perfect, uniform rows, are bundles of wool. Dozens of pairs of thick, dry, olive-drab wool socks. Voss stares at them. He stops breathing. For 9 days, his own socks have been soaking wet. For 9 days, he has rotated them against his bare chest inside his tunic, trying to use his dwindling body heat to dry the rotting fabric. He has felt his toes going numb. He has felt the early, terrifying sting of trench foot creeping into his joints, threatening to rot his flesh from the bone. Right there, in the mud, in the dark, the 22-year-old infantryman drops his rifle. He sits on a splintered piece of wood and unlaces his ruined, wire-tied boots. His fingers are bleeding and stiff. He strips off the rotting, foul-smelling rags covering his feet. He pulls on the dry American wool. The warmth is immediate. It is a physical shock. It is absolute mercy. Voss closes his eyes. In the freezing dark of the Hurtgen forest, with American artillery thundering over the canopy, tears cut tracks through the thick grime on his face. He does not sob. He does not make a sound. But he weeps. He is crying over a pair of socks. Next to him, Sergeant Brandt has opened one of the ration boxes. Inside is a self-contained universe of sustenance. Canned meat, compressed graham biscuits, a fruit bar, chewing gum, for cigarettes perfectly sealed in foil, water purification tablets, a tiny wooden spoon, and the chocolate. Brandt hands the small, dense brown block to Voss. The Hershey's tropical bar. Voss bites into it. The sugar hits his bloodstream like a narcotic. It is sweet, dense, almost painful in its richness. They chew in silence. They are eating the enemy's food, wearing the enemy's clothing, hiding in the shadow of the enemy's flawless machinery. But Sergeant Falco Brandt has stopped eating. The 34-year-old logistics man is holding a small olive-drab tin of processed bacon. He is not looking at the food. He is looking at the bottom of the tin. He holds it up to the pale moonlight filtering through the dense pine needles. He rubs the grime away from the metal with his heavy thumb. Brandt's eyes narrow. The lines around his mouth tighten. He reaches into the crate and picks up a second tin from a different ration box. He checks the bottom. Then he picks up a third. He is cross-referencing the stamped black numbers printed on the metal. The factory production codes. Brandt's mind, trained in the brutal, unforgiving arithmetic of industrial production, begins to work. He reads the dates. He reads the plant identification numbers. Germany's war economy in late 1944 is a desperate masterpiece of improvisation under extreme pressure. German engineers are producing weapons of extraordinary technical sophistication. The Tiger tank, the V-2 rocket, the jet fighter, things that, in isolation, are breathtaking. But Brandt knows the fatal flaw of breathtaking things. You cannot make enough of them. A single Tiger tank requires approximately 300,000 man-hours of labor to produce. From smelting the specialized Krupp steel to the final assembly of the Maybach engine. 300,000 hours of German labor. And that is if the factory roof has not been blown off by Allied bombers. Germany is rationing rubber, rationing steel, rationing copper in ways that shorten the life of every vehicle and every boot. Brandt looks at the bottom of the American tin. He reads the numbers. The color slowly drains from his face. "What is it, Sergeant?" Voss whispers. His voice is thick with chocolate and exhaustion. Brandt does not answer immediately. He traces the perfectly stamped numbers. He looks at the pristine cellophane on the ground. He looks at the perfectly milled tin. He looks at the mountain of heavy wooden crates still stacked inside the overturned truck. "These tins," Brandt finally whispers. His voice is flat, barely audible over the distant, rolling thunder of the guns. "This one was canned in Chicago. This one in Baltimore. This one in Omaha." Brandt looks up at Voss. The veteran sergeant's eyes are wide. They are hollow. "They were all produced in October," Brandt says. "Last month. By 8 different factories. Across thousands of miles." Brandt drops the tin. It hits the frozen mud with a dull, heavy thud. He is no longer looking at a meal. He is looking at an impossible machine. A logistics network that can harvest meat, process it, package it in flawless steel, coordinate it with 8 different manufacturing plants across a continent, funnel it to a single shipping port, load it onto a cargo vessel, cross a submarine-infested ocean, unload it on the coast of France, load it onto a train, then onto the specific truck and drop it into a freezing ravine in Germany. All of it in less than 3 weeks. And the cellophane isn't even wrinkled. Brandt knows what it takes to build things. He knows that to achieve this level of logistical perfection, the entire supply chain must be completely unhindered. It means the factories in the American Midwest are running 24 hours a day, bathed in electric light, completely untouched by aerial bombardment. It means the rail lines span the continent without a single broken track. It means the cargo ships are crossing the Atlantic Ocean practically untouched by the U-boat wolf packs that once commanded the seas. It means the American economy has not even begun to strain. It means the United States is not fighting a war of survival. They are fighting a war of industrial management. Gideon Voss looks at his sergeant. He feels the dry, warm wool against his skin. He tastes the rich sugar on his tongue. For the first time since the war began, the young private feels a cold, absolute terror creeping into his chest. It is a terror that has nothing to do with bullets, bayonets, or artillery. It is the terror of a man who suddenly realizes he is not fighting an army. He is fighting a factory, and the factory is just warming up. They drag the wooden crates back through the freezing mud. It takes them 2 hours to cover a single mile. The Hurtgen Forest does not surrender ground easily, not even to men trying to retreat. When Gideon Voss and Sergeant Falco Brandt finally reach the company command post, they are exhausted to the bone. The bunker is nothing more than a reinforced hole in the earth, roofed with shattered pine logs and packed dirt. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, gangrene, and stale tobacco. The men of the 275th Infantry Division look up as the 2 soldiers drag the heavy American crates into the dim light of a kerosene lantern. The distribution of the captured supplies is swift, but it is not a celebration. It happens in a tense, almost guilty silence. Men who have not seen adequate rations in weeks stare at the pristine wax cartons. They divide the cigarettes. They trade the chocolate. They slide their frozen, blackened feet into dry American wool. For a brief, shining hour, the brutal misery of the front line is held at bay. But morale does not improve. Instead, a strange, corrosive quiet settles over the bunker. The items act like a psychological virus. The sheer quality of the American goods is a glaring, unavoidable spotlight illuminating their own wretchedness. A German soldier looks at his rifle, bound together with wire, and then looks at the flawless, moisture-proof cellophane wrapper of an American cigarette pack. The comparison is devastating. It does not breed a fighting spirit. It breeds a terrifying, profound doubt. In the corner of the bunker, Sergeant Brandt sits on an overturned ammunition tin. He is not sleeping. He has arranged 3 empty K-ration boxes in front of him. His thick, dirt-stained fingers trace the production codes again. Voss sits across from him, his feet radiating a strange, unfamiliar warmth in the dry socks. He watches his sergeant. Brandt's eyes are fixed in the middle distance, staring through the dirt walls of the bunker, looking all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. 300,000, Brandt whispers. His voice is a low, rhythmic rasp. Sergeant Voss asks. Brandt does not look at him. He just keeps staring at the empty boxes. 300,000 man-hours, Girion. That is what it takes for our factories in Kassel to produce a single Tiger tank. From smelting the steel to the final assembly. 300,000 hours of German labor. Brandt picks up one of the empty olive drab boxes. He turns it in the lantern light. Do you know what the American Quartermaster Corps produced last month? Brandt asks. He doesn't wait for an answer. Over 100 million of these. 100 million combat rations. In a single month. They are burying us in food before they even fire a bullet. Voss feels a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The number is too large to comprehend. Sounds like science fiction. Sounds like a lie. But the proof is sitting right there in his dry boots. Before the war, Brandt continues, his voice devoid of emotion, I managed logistics for civilian construction. I know shipping tonnages. I know the bottlenecks of deep water ports. To move 100 million rations along with Sherman tanks, artillery shells, aviation fuel, and millions of men, you need ships. Thousands of ships. Brandt leans forward, the kerosene light casting deep, skull-like shadows across his face. I heard a rumor from a signals officer in Aachen. Brandt says softly, I thought it was enemy propaganda. I thought it was a joke. They call them Liberty ships.
10,000-ton cargo vessels.
The Americans are building them on assembly lines. Like chairs, Girion. A shipyard in California launched a fully functioning ocean freighter in 4 days, 15 hours, and 26 minutes. From the laying of the keel to hitting the water. For days, the bunker is dead silent. Even the distant thunder of the American artillery seems to pause. We are fighting a math problem, Brandt whispers, and the equation is already solved. Voss stares at his hands. He thinks of the rhetoric pushed by the high command, the endless speeches about German willpower, the propaganda posters demanding absolute sacrifice, promising that the spiritual superiority of the German soldier would overcome the material advantages of the enemy. Sitting in the freezing dirt, digesting the rich American chocolate, Voss realizes that willpower cannot sink a Liberty ship. Courage cannot outpace an assembly line. They are trying to stop an avalanche with bayonets. Morning comes, bringing a pale, grayish light that barely penetrates the forest canopy. The temperature has dropped further. The mud has frozen solid, turning the landscape into a jagged, ankle-breaking nightmare. At 0700 hours, a German patrol returns to the bunker. They are dragging a prisoner. He is an American corporal. His dog tags read Silas Vance. He is 20 years old. He looks younger. Vance is terrified, shivering in the cold morning air as the German soldiers push him into the command post. But as Voss looks at the young American, the terror is not what stands out. What stands out is his gear. Corporal Silas Vance is wearing a heavy, olive drab M1943 field jacket. It is intact. It is warm. It is water-resistant. His leather combat boots are laced tight, the soles thick and unworn. He does not have the sunken, haunted eyes of a man who has been starving. He has the healthy, rounded cheeks of a young man from Pennsylvania who has been consuming 3,000 calories a day. Sergeant Brandt steps forward. He orders the patrol to back away. He gestures for Vance to sit on a wooden crate. The young American complies, his eyes darting nervously around the dim, claustrophobic bunker. Brandt reaches into his greatcoat. He pulls out a solid block of American deration chocolate. A dense, fortified bar designed for emergency energy. Brandt had saved it from the truck last night. He tosses it into the American prisoner's lap. Vance looks down at the chocolate. Then he looks up at the towering German sergeant. Eat, Brandt commands in heavy, broken English. Vance hesitates for a second. Then, with trembling hands, he peels back the heavy paper wrapping. He bites into the hard chocolate. Voss watches the American from the shadows. He watches him with an intensity that borders on madness. He wants to see how the enemy consumes such a precious, life-saving commodity. He wants to see the reverence. He wants to see the desperation. But he doesn't. Corporal Silas Vance chews the chocolate quickly, nervously, but entirely casually. He does not savor it. He does not scrape the paper wrapper with his teeth to catch the last crumbs. He simply eats it. He eats it with the profound, devastating indifference of a man who knows with absolute certainty that there is more where that came from. He is consuming a commodity, not a miracle. The truck, Brant says, pointing eastward toward the ravine. In the valley. Your truck. Vance swallows hard, nodding quickly. Yes. Supply truck. Driver hit a patch of ice. Slid off the logging road in the dark. It was full, Brant says. Full of supplies. Left behind. Vance nods again, looking confused as to why the German sergeant is interrogating him about a crashed deuce and a half. Yeah. It was stuck. We couldn't winch it out. The lieutenant said to just leave it and hike back to the rally point. Voss steps forward, his voice cracking. He speaks enough English to ask the question that is burning a hole in his mind. You leave it. All of it. The food. The clothes. Vance looks at Voss. The 20-year-old American is genuinely bewildered by the intensity of the question. Yeah, Vance stammers, wiping his mouth. I mean, it is just one truck. The lieutenant called it in on the radio. They dispatched 2 more replacement trucks from the depot in Liege this morning. We do not have time to dig one out of a ditch. They dispatched 2 more. The words hang in the freezing air of the bunker. They hit Jerian Voss harder than a physical blow. If a German supply truck crashed, an entire company would be mobilized to recover it. Men would die trying to salvage the ammunition and the fuel. A single lost truck was a tactical disaster. It meant a platoon would starve. It meant an offensive would halt. To the Americans, it was garbage. It was a minor administrative inconvenience. They did not recover it. They just made a radio call, and the infinite churning machinery of the United States logistics network spat out 2 more to replace it. The concept of infinity is terrifying. It breaks the human mind. Voss looks at the young, healthy American prisoner, and then he looks at his own ragged, starving comrades. He realizes that Corporal Silas Vance does not need to be a better soldier than him. Vance does not need to be braver or smarter or a better marksman. Vance just needs to stand there while his factories bury the German army in steel and calories. Later that afternoon, the artillery stops. The sudden silence is jarring, leaving a ringing pressure in the ears of the men. Voss sits alone near the entrance of the bunker, the weak winter sunlight falling across his lap. He is sorting through the last remaining items salvaged from the splintered crate. A few loose packages of cigarettes. A spare tin of coffee powder. At the bottom of the canvas sack, his fingers brush against something soft. Something wrapped in brown waterproof paper. He pulls it out. The paper has sustained slight water damage, warping the edges, but the seal has held. Voss uses his combat knife to slice the thick tape. He expects medical supplies, a bandage, perhaps a manual for a weapon. The paper falls away. Voss is holding a book. It is a paperback novel, precisely 5.5 inches tall and 3¾ inches wide. It is an Armed Services edition, specifically designed and printed by the American Council on Books in Wartime. It is engineered to fit perfectly into the hip pocket of an American infantry uniform. Voss cannot read the English title printed on the cover, but he can see the illustration. It is a drawing of a cowboy on a horse, riding across a vast, peaceful desert. It is a story of fiction, a Western. Voss stares at the book for a long, unbroken minute. His breathing becomes shallow. His hands, wrapped in dirty bandages, begin to tremble. This is not a weapon. This is not food. This is not medicine. It has absolutely zero tactical value on a battlefield. Yet, someone in the United States government made a decision. A committee sat in a heated room in Washington or New York, and they decided that an American soldier fighting in the frozen hell of the Hurtgen Forest might get bored. They decided to print hundreds of thousands of novels. They sourced the paper. They sourced the ink. They ran the printing presses. They boxed them up, loaded them onto a train, loaded them onto a ship, defended that ship across the U-boat-infested Atlantic, unloaded it in Europe, drove it to the front lines, and dropped it into a combat zone. They consumed valuable shipping tonnage, weight that could have been used for bullets or blood plasma, just to provide their infantry with lightweight entertainment. Because they could. Because they had enough of everything else. Because their economy had so much excess capacity, so much ungodly slack in the system, that they could fight a global war on 2 separate oceans and still have the time and resources to ship paperback novels to the trenches. The moral complexity of the moment crushes whatever is left of Gerion Voss's fighting spirit. He had believed, even through the starvation and the cold, that suffering was a virtue. The German propaganda had drilled it into his head. Suffering makes you pure. Suffering makes you strong. Looking at the cheap paperback book, Voss realizes the ultimate humiliating truth. Suffering does not make you strong. It just means your logistics have failed. The Americans are not suffering. They are fighting a war with hot coffee, dry socks, fresh chocolate, and cowboy novels. They are treating the greatest conflict in human history as an industrial engineering project. Voss does not throw the book away. He slides it carefully into the deep pocket of his rotting tunic. He presses it against his chest, right next to his frozen, beating heart. He knows they are going to die in this forest, not because they lack courage, not because they lack tactical brilliance. They are going to die because they picked a fight with a factory that can build a ship in 4 days and still has time to print a story about a cowboy. Somewhere to the west, the American artillery begins to fire again. The rolling thunder returns, rhythmic, patient, and absolutely relentless. The silence of the Hurtgen forest shatters at exactly 1,400 hours. It does not begin with a single shot. It does not build from a distant rumble. It arrives all at once, an apocalyptic tearing of the sky that instantly displaces the freezing air. The Americans call it time on target. It is a mathematical doctrine of annihilation perfected by the United States Army Artillery School at Fort Sill. Through precise radio coordination, advanced meteorological data, and ruthless logistical supply, dozens of separate artillery batteries positioned miles apart calculate their firing arcs so that hundreds of high-explosive shells arrive on a single grid coordinate at the exact same millisecond. There is no warning. There is no time to dive into a trench. 1 second, Gerion Voss is sitting in the freezing dirt of the bunker, listening to the wind. The next second, the earth dissolves into a hurricane of fire, pulverized wood, and screaming steel. The barrage is absolute. It is a relentless, mechanical drumming. A normal army fires artillery in bursts, conserving ammunition, pausing to let the gun barrels cool, waiting for horse-drawn wagons to drag up new crates of shells. The Americans do not pause. They are firing the 155mm M107 high-explosive projectile. Each shell weighs exactly 95 pounds. They are dropping thousands of them into the treeline. The ground ripples like water. The ancient, towering pine trees of the Hurtgen do not merely snap. They are vaporized, turning into millions of lethal, high-velocity wooden splinters that strip the flesh from any man caught above ground. Inside the company command bunker, the shockwaves hit like physical hammers. The dirt walls heave inward. Dust chokes the air, thick and tasting of cordite and pulverized stone. Sergeant Faucobrandt is standing near the reinforced timber frame of the bunker's entrance. He does not even have time to reach for his helmet. A 155mm shell scores a direct hit on the bunker's roof. The physics of the blast are instantaneous and unforgiving. The kinetic energy of 95 pounds of forged American steel and TNT compresses the air inside the enclosed space. The overpressure wave expands at thousands of feet per second. The heavy pine logs supporting the ceiling splinter like dry matchsticks. The roof collapses in a suffocating avalanche of frozen mud and timber. Voss is thrown backward violently. He slams into the rear earthen wall. The world goes entirely black. A deafening, high-pitched ringing drowns out the thunder of the barrage. The air is sucked completely from his lungs. When Voss opens his eyes, he cannot see. He can only choke on the thick, suffocating dust. He scrambles blindly, his hands tearing at the dirt. He feels the crushing weight of the collapsed roof. He crawls forward on his knees, his hands sliding over the debris. He finds a hand. It is thick, calloused, and perfectly still. "Sergeant?" Voss gasps, his voice a pathetic wheeze against the roaring inferno outside. "Brandt." There is no response. Falco Brandt, the 34-year-old master mason, the man who understood the brutal mathematics of industrial warfare, has been crushed by the sheer weight of American mass production. He is gone, erased, buried beneath the mud and the perfectly milled steel of an economy he knew they could never defeat. Panic, pure and primal, seizes Voss. He realizes the bunker is becoming a tomb. The air is thinning. The artillery continues to pound the earth above, each impact driving the dirt tighter around him. He digs frantically toward a sliver of gray light penetrating the collapsed entrance. He drags his body through the narrow gap, his uniform tearing against jagged roots and shattered wood. He breaches the surface, gasping violently for air. The Hurtgen forest is gone. The ancient cathedral of pine has been transformed into a smoking, cratered moonscape. The sky is dark with pulverized earth. Then, the second wave of the barrage hits. Voss dives for the lip of a massive artillery crater. As he throws his body over the edge, a shell detonates 30 yards away. A piece of shrapnel, a jagged shard of high-carbon American steel, slices through the freezing air and tears into Voss's left forearm. The impact spins him around like a ragdoll. He tumbles to the bottom of the icy crater. The pain is not immediate. The human body, under extreme traumatic stress, relies on the massive dump of adrenaline to delay the processing of agony. Voss looks down at his left arm. The thick gray wool of his tunic is shredded. Beneath it, the flesh has been laid open to the bone. The shrapnel has severed the radial artery. Bright, arterial blood pumps rhythmically into the frozen mud. Voss is 22 years old, but his training takes over. He knows the medical reality of his situation. At 20 degrees Fahrenheit, with a severed artery, hypovolemic shock will set in within minutes. If his core body temperature drops below 95 degrees, his blood will lose its ability to coagulate. He will bleed to death in the bottom of this hole before the artillery even stops. With his right hand, he frantically tears the leather strap from his rifle sling. He wraps it high around his left bicep, pulling the heavy leather tight with his teeth. The crude tourniquet bites brutally into his muscle, but the bright red spurting slows to a dark, agonizing seep. He lies in the mud, breathing in ragged, shallow gasps. The cold is a physical presence, wrapping around him, trying to pull him down into the earth. The blood loss makes him dizzy. The edges of his vision begin to darken. He is going to die here. The thought is not a panic. It is a cold, rational calculation. The Hurtgen is finally claiming him. But as the darkness creeps in, he feels something else. His feet. For the first time in almost 2 weeks, his feet are not numb blocks of ice. Despite the freezing mud filling the bottom of the crater, despite the massive trauma to his arm, his extremities are warm. The thick, dry, olive-drab wool of the American socks is actively wicking the moisture away from his skin, trapping his dwindling body heat. The medical science of survival in extreme cold dictates that if the extremities freeze, the body's core temperature plummets exponentially. The American Quartermaster Corps designed those socks specifically to prevent trench foot and hypothermia in winter combat. The enemy's logistics are saving his life. The warmth in his feet provides just enough physiological resistance to keep him conscious. It keeps his heart pumping barely enough blood to his brain. It gives him the tiny, infinitesimal margin of energy required to keep his eyes open. He reaches into the deep pocket of his torn tunic with his good hand. He is looking for the American field dressing he had salvaged from the truck. His numb fingers bypass the waterlogged paperback novel. He grasps something smooth and crinkling. He pulls it out. It is the empty wrapper of the Chesterfield cigarettes. The heavy foil, perfectly bonded to the moisture-proof cellophane. Voss presses the pristine wrapper against his bloody face. The smell of the sweet American tobacco still lingers on the plastic. It is the smell of a world untouched by the starvation and the slaughter. It is the smell of safety. It is the smell of the massive, churning factories in Richmond, Virginia, where machines roll millions of these cigarettes an hour without a single interruption. He clutches the cellophane in his right hand. He holds onto it not as a piece of trash, but as a physical anchor to reality. It is an artifact from a superior civilization. It will not tear. It will not break. It is engineered to endure. Above him, the artillery rolls on. It does not stop. It will not stop for days. Voss closes his eyes, holding the cellophane tight, listening to the brutal, relentless roar of the American industrial machine tearing his world apart. 48 years later. November 1992. The room is warm. The thermostat is set to a comfortable 72 degrees. Outside the thick, double-paned glass of the window, a light snow falls over the quiet, manicured suburbs of Munich. Jurian Voss sits in a heavy leather armchair. He is 70 years old. His hair is snow-white, thinning at the crown, and his face is heavily lined, carrying the quiet dignity of a man who has survived a century determined to kill him. He wears a heavy wool sweater. His left arm rests on the armrest of the chair. It is stiff. The deep, jagged scar tissue running from his elbow to his wrist is a permanent topography of the Hurtgen forest. He has limited mobility in his left hand, the nerves having never fully recovered from the shrapnel that sheared through his muscle in 1944. On the polished mahogany side table next to him, sitting beneath the soft, warm light of a reading lamp, is a small, custom-made glass display frame. It does not hold a medal. It does not hold an Iron Cross or an infantry assault badge. It does not hold a photograph of a commanding officer. Inside the glass frame, pressed perfectly flat, is the silver foil and the cellophane wrapper of a Chesterfield cigarette pack. The plastic is slightly yellowed with age, but there is still not a single tear in the material. Voss looks at the frame. He looks at it every single day. For decades after the war, the world tried to tell stories about how the conflict was decided. Men wrote thick, dramatic books about the tactical genius of generals. They made cinematic movies about the romantic bravery of the frontline soldier. They talked about ideology, about good and evil, about the unbreakable spirit of the warrior. They argued over maps, pointing to flanking maneuvers and armored breakthroughs. Voss knows the truth. He knows the cold, unsentimental reality that historians try to dress up with poetry. He reaches out with his good right hand and touches the glass over the cellophane. Modern war is not won by romance. It is not won by the bravery of an 18-year-old boy charging a machine gun nest. Bravery is cheap. Bravery is common. Every army in the history of the world has had brave men willing to die for a piece of dirt. Modern war is an equation. It is won by mathematics. It is won by a 45-year-old machinist working a third-shift stamping press in Detroit, Michigan. It is won by railway schedules. It is won by the depth of deep-water ports, the carrying capacity of cargo ships, and the tensile strength of mass-produced steel. Voss thinks of Sergeant Falco Brandt. He thinks of the absolute terror in the older man's eyes when he read the production codes on the bottom of a bacon tin. Brandt had seen the ghost of their defeat written in black ink. 8 factories, 8 different states, 1 month. The United States did not defeat the German army with superior courage. They defeated them with superior logistics. They buried the German war machine under a mountain of surplus. They drowned them in Liberty ships, in 155mm artillery shells, in dry wool socks, and in 2.5-pound K rations. They won because their system was so vast, so incredibly wealthy in resources and organizational bandwidth, that they could fight a war of existential annihilation across 2 oceans and still find the time, the money, and the cargo space to ship paperback novels and tropical chocolate bars to men sitting in the mud. They fought with the terrifying, casual confidence of abundance. Voss leans back in his leather chair. The house is completely silent, save for the soft ticking of a grandfather clock in the hallway. Sometimes, when the winter air is particularly cold, and the snow looks a certain way outside his window, Voss's mind drifts back to the ravine. He remembers the smell of the cordite. He remembers the paralyzing cold. He remembers the terrifying, rhythmic thunder of the American guns. But mostly, he remembers the smell. It is a phantom scent that has haunted him for half a century. Even now, sitting in the warmth of his home, surrounded by peace and quiet, he can close his eyes and smell it perfectly. Rich, sweet, earthy, undeniable. The smell of Hershey's chocolate. It was the smell of the exact moment he realized his world was over. It was the scent of the industrial hurricane that was coming to wipe them all away. It was the smell of a machine that never slept, never starved, and never stopped producing. Jirian Voss closes his eyes, breathes in the warm air of his living room, and knows that the machine won. And it was never even close.